Amen.
Thank you very much, Chairman Maston. First of all, let me thank you that we are doing this joint hearing, bringing further focus and hopefully some resolution, the beginning of resolutions to this horrific problem. Public pressure motivated by explosive new evidence that UNRWA employees were directly involved in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack on Israel. The Biden administration last Friday, as we know, announced that it was, quote, temporarily paused additional funding for UNRWA while it reviews the evidence. With all due respect to the president, this was a long overdue response. Going far beyond the revelations of last week, however, there has been long been a massive and irrefutable evidence of UNRWA's extensive complicity and cooperation in Hamas's anti-Semitic, genocidal hate campaign. Like the Nazis before them, Hamas and their chief terrorism sponsor, Iran, they are committing genocide against the Jews. As many of you know, and many of my colleagues have read, and maybe some recently, the 1988 Hamas Charter demands the absolute destruction of the State of Israel and proclaims, quote, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam obliterates it. Article 7 of the Hamas Charter demands the slaughter of all Jews. Quote, the day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Then the Jews will hide behind rocks and trees, and the rocks and trees will cry out, O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him, close quote. Article 13 of the 1988 Charter of Hamas explicitly rejects initiatives for peace and reconciliation and states, quote, initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principle of the Islamic resistance movement. In its 2017 charter, building on the first one, Hamas reiterates its goal of wiping Israel off the face of the earth and says, quote, there is no alternative to a fully sovereign Palestinian state on the entire national Palestinian soil, with Jerusalem as its capital, close quote. In 2018, President Trump suspended all U.S. funding to UNRWA, and they survived without the 30% of their budget the U.S. typically provides. But tragically, in 2021, the Biden administration resumed lavish support from UNRWA without reform. The U.S. government has donated more than $1 billion to UNRWA since 2021. In fiscal year 2022, U.S. taxpayers gave UNRWA $364 million. In 23, $344 million. And in fiscal year 24, the U.S. is on track to provide $371 million. But the administration has failed to provide clarity about how much of this funding is affected by the pause announced on January 26th. Yesterday, joined by Chairman Mast and Chairman Wilson, we introduced H.R. 7122, legislation to prohibit our government from making any voluntary or involuntary contributions to UNRWA. A good deal of the evidence of UNRWA's involvement with Hamas and other terrorist groups, as well as educating children towards terrorism, that is, poisoning their minds, has been presented publicly at hearings, including 2 that I have chaired during the last 8 months. Those 2 hearings, one was on June 22nd and a second on November 8th, and we heard from some of the witnesses, including Hillel Neuer, who is here today, and the information is absolutely devastating. How these children from the earliest days of their lives are trained in hate for Jews and for Americans. Now we've heard how UNRWA's textbooks, curricula, summer camps, and official media are all infamous incubators of hate. And we've seen the evidence of its teachers' and administration's involvement with Hamas. They don't make their case, as you can see. The hatred coming out of that particular man is so sad. UNRWA, the UN Relief Works Agency, was set up, as we know, in 1949 to provide aid to relief to refugees. 75 years later, it's still going, which is absurd in a way, since nearby Arab nations will not permit the former to integrate into their societies. UNRWA provides education in hatred of Jews for the vastly expanded number of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the original refugees. UNRWA's textbooks, and I've had meeting after meeting on this, including hearings, where we've actually read through the textbooks, filled to overflowing with anti-Semitic hatred. This is all, this is serious. Aspects of its anti-Semitism is so twisted, I won't describe all of them here, but they talk about martyrdom, suicide bombers to children. A new report by the UN Watch, carefully documents, quote, how UNRWA teachers in a 300-member UNRWA staff Telegram group cheered and celebrated Hamas's October 7th massacre, while at the same time they were asking about their salaries. When are they going to get paid? The UNRWA staff in the group shared photos and video footage of those events and prayed for the terrorists' success and for Israel's destruction in clear violation of UN rules. Thank you, Hillel, for being here today, for testifying about this. Similarly, Impact SC has recently published 3 reports analyzing, quote, hundreds of pages of teaching materials revealing that content glorifying terrorism, inciting violence, and promoting anti-Semitism is actually included in UNRWA's own materials created by UNRWA staff for UNRWA students. Thank you, Mr. Sheff, for joining us to bear witness to that ugly, ugly truth. And Mr. Goldberg has pointed out, UNRWA doesn't recognize Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, or the PFLP as terrorist groups, does not submit staff, contractors, or beneficiaries for U.S. counterterrorism vetting. It indoctrinates generation after generation to hate Jews, to hate Israel, and prepare for genocide. For UNRWA, terror finance is a feature, he points out, not a bug, close quote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.